Welcome, everyone, to our presentation today on Presenting for Impact, How Leaders Command the Room and Shape Outcomes. I've been looking forward to speaking about this based on some current events that I'll mention as well as we go through today's presentation. So a few webinar reminders to start out with, a few points to mention. Our purpose today is to share approaches to help you focus on behaviors, mindset, and communication disciplines that separate competent speakers from influential ones. Questions, please write your questions in the Q&A section. Our goal is always to answer all these questions at the close of the presentation. If we don't get to all of them, I will follow up with you directly afterwards via email. This question frequently comes up. Yes, the materials, the entire webinar is being recorded. You will receive a link via email next day or two, and you'll be able to download the presentation deck in its own separate file as well. For those attending today who are graduates of the International Board Director Competency Designation, you will receive 1 CPE credit by attending. Just be sure to follow proper CPE credit submission guidelines. Thank you. I am your speaker and host today, Mark A. Pfister. I'm a governance and strategy expert. I'm known as the board architect. My book, Across the Board, which came out in 2018, it's been updated a few times, is now in circulation in over 70 countries. And I am also the creator and founder of the International Board Director Competency Designation. For those on this webinar today, if you're not already have not already gone through the course or are certified, I welcome you to check out our education and certification. All right, let's jump into it. Our goals for today, what to walk away with from today's discussion. This is the path I want to take you on regarding presenting for impact. So why presence is a leadership issue, not necessarily a speaking skill, number one. Number two, a mindset shift that changes everything as it relates to speaking and your presence. I'd like to talk also about structuring messages for decision impact. Commanding the room in real time. This is a challenge for many people. I'm going to help you a little bit with this today. Applications where this matters most. And then closing, I'll ask an impact question that I'd like you to evaluate yourself. Are you making the impact that you want to make with the groups that you are leading or working with? So that is our path for today. Let me start out. I want you to keep in mind for today's discussion, I want you to not only think about how this is applied in the boardroom, but also for all presentations, any type of public speaking, any meetings, and many other scenarios where you are asked to present something. This is a fit for all of these areas, different areas to hone and to think about as you go through your presentation skill set and hone those skill sets. So let's start out with why presence is a leadership issue, not necessarily a speaking skill. Main concept, first and foremost, presence is your leadership signal. This is the signal that you're portraying to others as you're speaking. So this leadership reality, let's look at a few points here on this reality. Leaders are typically judged in moments that matter, important matters. Typically, there are larger audiences when there are issues that matter that are being decisioned on. So know that many times you want to be prepared in advance, even in some cases not knowing when these major moments are going to arrive. Be prepared for this. This is a reality in how you're judged. Influence is often decided before content is processed. This comes back to your mannerisms, your presence, your body language. Very important. And presence signals judgment before words are evaluated. I sometimes think about this when I see a speaker walking up on stage. How did they approach the stage? Were they confident? Did they look like they know what they were doing? Did they convey this calmness when they walked up there? Or did they actually look nervous? This presence is this signal judgment and can really affect any type of delivery. Even if you have a great message to give, if that presence is not there from the beginning, it will be noticed. So our key message here is that boards and executives teams don't necessarily evaluate how well you speak. They evaluate initially whether to trust your judgment. This needs to be embedded right from the beginning of any time you're making a presentation or getting a point across. You'll see in each one of our areas today we discuss also, I want to offer up a little boardroom insight. These are things throughout the years and having worked with hundreds of boards around the world, just things I notice over time, and I wanted to convey them to you today. Boards don't just listen to your message, they evaluate the judgment behind it. So the presence is an association to your judgment, and you can elevate the perception of the judgment in how you deliver the message. This is this leadership reality that we're trying to get across today. Now, presence also has a correlation to good ideas when they fail. What are we saying when we mean this? So, strategy rejected not on merit but delivery. I see this quite often. A strategy or even a governance model is proposed, but the delivery is not solid. So, it creates doubt in those who are listening to this proposal. Credibility, of course, can be eroded through weak presence. This is a given. It's what we're already talking about here at this early stage of this discussion today. And this is the big one to take away from this particular discussion area here. Execution confidence often outweighs analytical depth. So the confidence in your ability to execute on something, even to get your point across, in many cases can outweigh the analytical depth of what you are proposing. So the key message here is that at senior levels, how something is delivered becomes part of the substance itself. Many will argue that that substance actually accounts for more percentage-wise than the how of what you're discussing, how it's delivered. The boardroom insight on this is the following, that delivery is often interpreted as confidence in execution. Now, one of the things for those that have been through the IBDC.D program, something that we really drive home in that education and certification program is that how do you right size things that you're proposing, whether it's a strategy, a governance model, even a decision? That right sizing actually with a knowledge of how you're going to propose this and the confidence in the execution side can greatly help you in the proposal of this and actually shorten the amount of time that it takes to propose a great idea by thinking about this confidence that you want to exude and convey when you're proposing something. This all comes back to your presence, of course. Now, this mindset shift that I discussed as part of our introduction, I want to talk about this also. I think there is a mindset shift that has to go through someone's mind when they are presenting or trying to convince others. And this is something that really can change the way that you are received in how you propose something. So first and foremost, the main concept is that the mindset is actually your leadership position. This is what you're conveying. And in doing so, the speaker's real job, you are not there to inform. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this throughout today's presentation. In a true leadership position, you are not there to inform. You are there to influence decisions. There's a big differentiator in that, in how you come across, in how you're presenting as well. And your role in this, not to inform, but to influence decisions, your role is to reduce the uncertainty for the audience. That audience can be the board. It can be those that have come to see you speak. It can be a meeting. It can be directing or giving input to those that work or report directly into you. So presentations should not be viewed as updates. You should think of these as influence events. How are you going to influence those who are in your purview that you're trying to convince? Now, the boardroom insight as it relates to this, executives don't typically need more information. They need clarity about what matters. You'll see a little bit further also in this presentation today how we talk about the less is more concept. I'll expand upon this in just a moment. Now, also in this mindset shift, the authority versus approval. I see many struggle with this over and over again. It's not something that goes away without practice, I will say that. So first of all, approval-seeking language will weaken your impact. We're in this stage today in the delivery mechanisms for many people where they believe that if they can try to be all things to all people. I firmly believe that it's more important to take a stance on something and not try to please all the people all the time. So this approval-seeking language can truly weaken your impact. Secondly, authority is conveyed through composure and clarity, not by being loud, not by looking for approval, not trying to make everybody your friend when you're proposing something. Remember this composure and clarity as you're going through your presentations. And leaders also, true leaders, project certainty without sounding rigid. Now, this is sometimes a great challenge for many when they're going through a presentation or trying to convince others or influence others. They're thinking that they have to be so certain and so bought into their concepts and their ideas that they come across as rigid and not willing to change. And we know, quite frankly, very deeply that great executives are open to challenges, they are open to change as they should be. So the key message here is that the room reads your internal posture before it hears your words. And you do this through how you project your comments, how you position your comments, the intonation of your words. And the boardroom insight here is that the moment you start seeking approval, you actually stop projecting leadership. Now, I know I may get a few questions on this as we go through today's presentation, but just know that yes, you're trying to get your point across, but you're not necessarily seeking approval. What I'm talking about approval here is acceptance of you, your message, your position, your delivery. You're looking to get your point across, and you want to do that in such a way that establishes your authority in a mindful way. This mindset shift also includes how senior or experienced audiences listen. Another great and important point here. Executives listen for clarity, judgment, and consequence. What are the outcomes? Over-explaining signals uncertainty. We see this all the time with folks trying to describe something. It's like a salesperson trying to oversell you something. There's too many words, too much detail. So remember, wait for the questions to come in on something. Give maybe 2 or 3, I prefer 3 great points to support something that you're proposing, but don't over-explain these as it can again signal uncertainty in what you're proposing. And senior audiences or executives also evaluate implications faster than details. This is something I've learned over the years in watching great executives, great leaders, great board directors. When they're hearing the information come to them in a proposal, in a presentation, they're not just thinking about the facts that are coming to them, they're thinking about the implications. Where does this bring us? What are the causes and the outcomes? What are the risks that come along with this? This is the indication of a great executive, a great leader. So know that you want to correlate your presentation and your delivery directly to the implication side to this. We're going to talk a little further about this also. So the key message here is that senior audiences reward precision, not volume. And I've been in some great board meetings where they've gotten through in a significant amount of information, but it doesn't take all day or 2 days of board meetings to do this. They come prepared. There's precision in how things are presented. And the boardroom insight here again is that senior leaders listen for risk, consequence, and direction, not necessarily completeness. Now, don't take this terminology of not completeness as not being thorough. That's not what I'm trying to get across here. What I'm saying is that the overselling concept in presenting can undermine your message, lead to extended periods of time of deliberation when they don't necessarily need to. Now, structuring your message for decision impact is also another very important thing to think about as you're presenting. The main concept here is that structure is actually your decision architecture. I want you to think about the word architecture here as the proactive means of structuring how you're going to deliver your message. So one governing idea is what we call this, and making sure that you stay on point. Every effective presentation typically has one core idea. Today, we're going through presenting for impact. Our core idea is how do we command the room and shape outcomes, all under the umbrella of presenting for impact. One concept. Supporting points must reinforce this core idea. Now, I'll mention again, for those who have been through the IBDC.D program, we are very laser focused in this idea of the law of threes. And the law of threes is that you deliberately choose 3 supporting points that support each of your core ideas. And I'm going to give you a quick side note on this here. Again, we go into depth in this in the course itself. And I'm going to use the analogy or the famous term or phrase of blood, sweat, and tears. We hear this all the time for teams and overcoming adversity, all these different things. Let me tell you quickly where this came from on a little side note here. So, Winston Churchill first used this in one of his most famous speeches. This was his first speech as Prime Minister to the House of Commons during World War II on May 13th, 1940. This was just 3 days after becoming Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Now, the reason this is important is that in his actual speech in 1940, he did not say blood, sweat, and tears. Three things. He actually said four things: blood, toil, tears, and sweat. Why don't we remember that? Why don't we use that? Well, we could say that toil is not as popular a word. However, I think it's different. I think it's because our human mind remembers more deeply in threes. So we pulled from that blood, sweat, and tears. We left out the fourth word of toil. This is a prime example of how we remember in threes, and we can drive home a point much more deeply by sticking to three supportive points. Now, if the core message isn't memorable, you already know the delivery failed. So make this simple. A core idea, three supporting points to that, move to questions when you're in a particular presentation or a boardroom. Key message here: if the audience is overwhelmed with too many concepts or ideas, you failed. The area to avoid here again is that many people think that by adding more detail, it supports their point. It actually does the opposite. It undermines their point by having too many details. Choose the most important three, truncate those to be very clear and concise, deliver those three supportive points in support of your core idea. So again, in the boardroom, I see this happen all the time where the presenter or the committee chair loses the remainder of the board in presenting something for vote because the core point cannot be remembered afterwards. So it truly never landed in the boardroom. Don't overwhelm. Less is more is the concept here I'm trying to get across under one governing idea. Decision first structuring. This is another great thing to think about when you're delivering a message. Lead with implication, not background. I see this mistake with speakers all the time. They give you the details first and then talk about what their point is or the outcome or the implication of those points that they're talking about. What I'm suggesting you do here, because of the greater impact, is lead with the implication, then give the background on that implication. This goes also to what I mentioned a moment ago on the executive mindset. Great executives are thinking more so at first and foremost about the implications of what's being presented, not necessarily the facts and the details to support it. First, they're using the facts and the details to support the outcome of their vote or their input. Context should earn its place. Let me be sure I clarify what I mean by this. Only include background or supporting information if it directly helps the audience make a better decision or understand the implication faster. Goes back to what I said a moment ago on the law of threes to support your core point. Only focus on the context that is relevant. And again, start with where the risk or opportunity lives. This is somewhat of an overlap of the implication, but if you want to drill down further on the implication, talk about this in terms of the risk or the opportunity area. So the key message of this area of decision first structuring is that your audience typically cares less about how you got there than what it means to them going forward. Can be somewhat counterintuitive. It may seem like you are presenting in a backwards format, but understand that this is how great audiences or how you capture audiences to get your point across. Now, the boardroom insight here again is that executives process implications first and details second. Structure your presentations and your proposals accordingly. This could be either as a board member presenting to the board or what we commonly call board level experience. If you're not a seated voting fiduciary board member, but you are presenting to the board, structure your content in the way that we're describing here to get your point across. It'll land much more deeply. This also goes along the lines of what we call framing before facts. So framing can guide the interpretation. Framing basically is the path you're bringing someone down as you're discussing something. I do it in all my presentations. I did it today when we started out. I showed you the path I'm going to take you with the headings and the titles of each one of the topic areas and what to walk away with from that goal slide that we reviewed earlier. That's my framing. I do it in every single presentation. I want you to know what we're going to touch on and where I'm taking you and what the outcome should be by the time you're done spending time with me today. Facts without framing invite resistance. We see this all the time. Every time I see a politician speak, I think about this. The facts that are given sometimes when they're not framed properly, or the outcome is not discussed, or the implication is not addressed first, the facts can actually invite resistance and diversion. Bring those in at a secondary point, not the initial point. And strong framing lowers what we call cognitive friction. Let me just describe what this is. And I've written down the true in-depth descriptions here or definitions. Cognitive friction refers to the resistance that arises when cognitive effort, in other words, reasoning, encounters misaligned structures, excessive demands, or unclear conditions for action. This is all what we've been talking about today. How are you making your delivery and your point as clear as possible? You want to avoid what we're calling here this cognitive friction. You do this by framing the facts in support of the implication or the risk or the outcomes that you're looking to describe. So the key message is that most persuasive speakers decide the lens or the pathway or the framing before showing the actual data. It's a very powerful way to do this. Now, the boardroom insight here is that facts rarely change minds. Framing determines how facts are judged. I want you to think about this a little more deeply. I tried for a while to come up with the words and the phrasing here of exactly what I wanted to mention here. And this is that, again, you're not necessarily trying to change a mind in your proposal or in your delivery or your presentation. You're trying to determine more so, and you want to focus on this different mindset here, on framing how the facts are going to be judged in support of your implication, your risk, or your outcome. Think about that one. It's probably one of the most important statements I want you to pull away from today's presentation. Now, commanding the room in real time. This is another area that many struggle with. I can tell you this is something you can hone over time. The main concept here to think about as we start is delivery is your authority in motion. You're going to see some of my comparisons to hand gestures here in just a moment also. So your physical authority signals, some of these may come across as counterintuitive. Again, I want you to step away and think about these things. So stillness can communicate confidence. And I've started to watch this over the last few years. I want to see if someone who is more animated, do I get the sense that they are having trouble communicating or getting their point across? And what I'm witnessing in this and my ongoing observations is that in many cases, a significant amount of body movement actually undermines the point they're trying to get across in my evaluation. That's not always the case. Sometimes it can work in the benefit depending on the audience. But in most cases, this stillness also manifests itself into a delivery mode that seems more calm, which brings across the confidence, which builds the trust, which gets the point across to delivery. Now, controlled movement can reinforce emphasis. So I like to do this. I like to do slight head movements. I like to do slight hand movements. It's rare that I use both of my hands, whether I'm live or in video. I think too much movement can divert from the message you're trying to get across. So think about your movements as your physical authority signals and how you want that to support the text and the context that you're trying to get across. An intentional posture also establishes your leadership presence. I know for me, it may be a biased viewpoint, but if someone's presenting in a room around a table and they're slouching as they're presenting, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about how it affects their delivery, how it affects their intonation of how they're delivering a point or a concept. So the posture also establishes your leadership presence. Now, the key message here is that authority is often communicated by what you don't do. Don't slouch. Don't have too much movement in how you physically deliver a message to support your point. Aim for some of that stillness that brings across the calmness and the confidence. So the boardroom insight here is that stillness signals control, and unnecessary movement sometimes can signal, in most cases, uncertainty. Keep this in mind as you're delivering messages or trying to convince others of your proposal. Now, there's obviously a voice and a timing component to this. And this is also something that I think is a challenge for many speakers. Your pace influences your credibility. Make no mistake about it. A slower pace equals higher confidence in the eyes of your audience. I struggled with this for years. If I was nervous when I was speaking, I spoke faster. I have worked extremely hard to slower my delivery, to focus more on the enunciation and the pronunciation of words that I'm delivering. It's not easy, but it's something that I work on personally. Some people are able to do this just inherently without it much work. Others have to work on this. Know that if you're speeding up your speech and the delivery, it's being perceived as someone who is uncertain. Strategic pauses also can create gravity. Now, this can be uncomfortable for many. I like to test myself with this if I'm on stage in front of a large audience. Am I okay with creating a pause? Can I hear people in the audience at that point? What's happening out there? So these pauses can really play in your favor, and it forces those that are listening to you to think about the point you just delivered and to get ready for the next point you're about to make. So the silence can really create weight in your delivery. In many cases, if I even compare back to this presentation today, the way that I've built out my presentations, they actually automatically cause some of these pauses. This has to do with the animations that I'm showing you right now between 1, 2, and 3. I have to pause between them, and I'm making a conscious effort to make sure that I don't jump to the next one too soon. And variation in tone can prevent what's called cognitive drift. And I want to read out this definition as well. Many of you will understand what I'm saying when I read this. So, cognitive drift refers to the gradual, often unnoticed shift in how a person or group thinks, reasons, or makes decisions over time, usually moving away from the original standards, intentions, or objective judgment. So, cognitive drift happens, for example, if you have a very monotone delivery by a speaker. You start thinking about other things. You're not drawn into their conversation. You're not making the connection with what they're talking about. That's what we call cognitive drift. So think about how your delivery is made. Do slight intonations in your speech. Slight hand movements, as we said a moment ago, or I like to say hand movements, so it's not two at the same time. These things can truly help you deliver your message and make an impact. So the key message here is that speed in your delivery dilutes your authority, especially when you're in senior or executive levels of an organization. Practice this. Slow down your delivery. Think about who your audience is. And the boardroom insight here is that the more senior or established the audience, the slower the delivery should feel when you're presenting a message. Practice this. The human nature of nervousness is to speed up your speech. Start to practice this. Even if you're nervous or you have anxiety, slow your speech down. Not to the point where it's annoying or too slow, but to the point where you can enunciate. You can offer up pauses in how you're speaking. This is a very important concept in your voice and your timing. Now, one last area here before we move to some questions, really our final comments and our questioning, handling pushback without losing control. I've seen some great presentations over the years, proper intonation, controlled speaking, minimal body movements, hand movements, whatever it may be, head movements. But the minute the questions come in or the pushback starts, all of a sudden, everything that speaker did for the last 15, 20 minutes is all lost because of how they're handling pushback or questions that are coming in that seem more as challenges rather than supportive gestures. So I want you to change how you're handling these areas if you get questions that are pushback, even if you're presenting in large audiences. View questions or pushback for that matter as influence moments. Think to yourself that even the biggest jerk in the audience who asks you a question that's a loaded question or pushes back or makes a comment that's a derogatory comment, keep your cool with this. This is your moment to influence based on how you respond. Avoid defensiveness, of course. Steve Jobs was a master at this. In some of his largest presentations he did to his organization and to shareholders, he would get some pretty significant pushback. What did he do? And I welcome you to watch these things on YouTube. He pauses, in some cases, almost to the point of uncomfortableness, 30 seconds, a minute, and then he answers in a very calm demeanor. It's extremely powerful. So a calm acknowledgement also signals your executive maturity. You can really make an impact on any side, as I say, of the table in the boardroom or any executive area instance. You can really make an impact by having this calm demeanor. So the key message here is how you respond under pressure can actually matter more than your original point. Most pushback happens towards the end of a presentation. So again, you could have had the most amazing presentation, got across your core points, your core message with your 3 supportive points. You're just about there. Somebody comes at the end with a combative type question. You lose it. You just lost all that effort and time you put into that. However, turn this around. Avoid the defensiveness. View it as an influence moment. Have just as calm a demeanor in your response as you did during your presentation. So the boardroom insight here is that do not view pushback as resistance. It's actually, utilize it as a test of your leadership composure. Not always easy to do, but the minute you start to feel heated or want to respond back very quickly, you already know you're going down the path of defensiveness. Start to think about that. Use the pause as your ability to regroup. There's nothing wrong with that. You'll come across as smarter in the room with that ability to pause. And quickly, where application of this matters most. So make no mistake, your application is indeed your impact. What do I mean by that? So in boardroom and executive scenarios, difficult recommendations are typically where this should be applied. Strategy and risk briefings. I bring this up. It may sound a little bit off base here, but in my personal experience in working with boards, I see the most importance in the delivery of strategy and risk briefings. These have the ability to truly go off track, to become more heated conversations, especially if there's disagreement or other problems within that board, within that organization. So keep in mind or go into it with the mindset that typically if you're proposing strategy or addressing risk areas, your mind should immediately snap into this mindset of the application of this presenting for impact and commanding the room and shaping the outcomes. Calmness, your approach matters in this. And of course, where moments where decisions affect long-term value of organizations. This actually goes without saying, I know, but it's again, in my personal experience, this is in many cases where conversations go off the trail. So the key message here is that the higher the stakes, the more your presence matters. Think about this in terms of your application. The boardroom insight is typically that high stakes conversations rarely fail from weak analysis. They fail from weak alignment. And the correlation I'm trying to make here is that the alignment comes from how do you continue to command the room and influence the outcomes, even if you are heading into rough seas or contentious discussions. Remember, this alignment is what you're going for. You do that through calm and direct conversation. And virtual presence. This is a big thing to mention today as well. Today's webinar is a prime example of this. Authority can be lost on video. And furthering that point, virtual settings actually amplify your weakness. All of someone's attention is laser focused, not just on your presentation if you're sharing it, but in your face as it relates to your camera. It's right up in there. There's no hiding from this. Yes, you can turn your camera off, but that's a whole nother story. So remember that virtual settings can truly amplify your weakness. You want to make sure that you are set in how you're proposing, how you're conveying yourself as it relates to video. Keep in mind also that attention must be managed deliberately. Now, this is kind of a funny statement. I don't mean this to sound manipulative in any way, but you have to make sure and be true to yourself that you're able to keep your audience's attention. And you want to manage this deliberately. If you see audience members tuning out in a live scenario, pull them into the conversation, ask them a question. And camera framing and eye line now function as executive body language. This is kind of an interesting statement to make, and I'll tell you why I believe this. I've been on many a board meeting where cameras are simply not set up right or the sound is off. I don't need to see all the way up into someone's nostrils and see their brain because they're not thinking about the angle of the camera as they're proposing something to the board. These types of things are important. Your backgrounds are important. Think about how you are framing yourself when you're presenting in a virtual type environment. So, key message here is that virtual does not lower the bar. It actually can raise the bar. It should raise the bar and how you consider how your delivery is being received by others. Now, the quick boardroom insight on this is on video, authority must be tuned. It no longer happens naturally. We're not talking about TikTok videos here where anything goes. Doesn't matter what your background is. Things are moving. What we're talking about here is a controlled environment to make sure you're getting your point across in a way that's respectful and is received properly by your audience. All right, let's go to closing, a few other points, and then we'll get to questions. So the impact question here. Are you making the impact your role requires based on your presentation, your skills, or your honing of your presentation? And a few things to remember as you go about your day, your week, your year. Leadership is experienced, not announced. Again, I want you to think a little more deeply about this, is that just your title is not something that is going to give you the respect of your leadership. It has to be experienced. Number two, influence makes your audience listen more intently. And I'm not, again, talking about influence based on title. I'm talking about how you're presenting and conveying yourself. And the beauty of this is that influence compounds when presence becomes consistent. So one presentation that went well and three others following that were not as honed or as tuned or in tune does not give you the consistency that you need to always be viewed as the person that is coming across as delivering a message in a way that is accepted by those who are listening. So the consistency absolutely matters here. So the key message on this, leadership is often decided in moments when you speak, not because you spoke, but because of how you were experienced. I'm going to repeat that, how you were experienced. Sometimes the experience matters more than the level of detail that you've given in your presentation or in your proposal. All right. Quickly, for those of you who have not experienced becoming an exceptional board director candidate education and certification course, I welcome you to check it out. This not only covers modern day board operations, but board director candidate packaging. And remember also, this is an international certification, which most boards are looking today. We call this macro directorship, not micro directorship, which many education and certification programs are by region or locality. I welcome you to check that out. All right, so let's move to some questions now. Let me start to pull these up here. Bear with me one moment. Okay. Here's the question. I still get nervous when I have to speak in front of a group. How can I overcome this? Yeah. So few points I want to make on this. One is that practice your delivery. There's absolutely nothing wrong with finding a room, quiet space at your house, wherever you are, to go through the delivery. I know it's going to seem strange to close the door of a room and talk to yourself in that room, but do it in front of a mirror. Try to make sure you understand you're able to see what your body movements are. What does your face look like? How are you delivering your message? The other thing I typically recommend is you need to know your topic extremely well. Now, my hope is that if you're presenting something, you do know it extremely well, either through repetition, either through time and preparation. These are areas that you want to make sure that you're not caught off guard in questions that come up that you know are going to possibly derail you. And I also say, ask yourself the tough questions first. Make sure that when you're practicing, that become that jerk in the room. Ask the question of yourself that you know is possibly going to come up. And are you able to answer that? I also like to say that you want to treat this nervousness as excitement. So one of the things I do before a speaking engagement, which by the way, for me, speaking in front of a small audience of 10 is actually more difficult for me than speaking in front of an audience of 3,500 or 5,500 people. Why is that? You're much closer to them. The interaction is much more personal. So, in thinking about this, always treat this potential nervousness, or as some people say, the butterflies, treat this as excitement. Start to change your mindset of this. Say, I'm not actually nervous. I'm excited to go out there. You'll see that your mind will start to change, your mindset will change in what you're thinking that feeling is. And use the first 30 seconds. This is something I do. I still, quite honestly, 20 minutes before I go to speak, I wouldn't say I'm nervous, as I mentioned a moment ago. I like to think of it more as excitement, but sometimes that feeling kind of comes over me. And I try to make sure that that's a memory to myself or a reminder to treat the first 30 seconds of speaking to establish my footing. And what I mean by that is to get my point across, focus initially on my tone, on my delivery, on my hand placements if I'm up on stage. Use that first 30 seconds to get your footing. You'll find that if you take that first 20 or 30 seconds to ground yourself, the rest of that time frame, whether it's 15 minutes or 45 minutes left or an hour, you'll see that you're in a much better place if you're focused on getting that grounding very quickly. I see a question here also. How do you handle a question you may not have thought of and really not know the answer? So, quite honestly, I get questions up on stage I don't know the answer to, and I say it. I lose respect for those who try to make an answer or put together or throw together an answer to something that they don't know the answer to. Have the confidence to say, I do not know the answer to that, but I will find out. Look for me after speaking today, and let me get your contact information. Do not be scared to say you don't know something. It actually is quite human to say those things. Do not be the person that comes up with an answer that's either wrong or is so bringing someone down such a winding path that by the end of it, you didn't really even answer the question. Don't be scared to do that. All right. Another question here. I tend to use a lot of hand movements when I speak. It gets even more animated when I have a tough or complicated message to deliver. Any insights or recommendations to control this better? Yeah, practice is the first thing. So, hand movements, again, are not necessarily a bad thing, but if you start watching and evaluating someone who speaks and say they're answering questions, the questions typically they're comfortable with, there are less hand motion than the questions they are not comfortable with. There's usually more hand motion. It's a way of somebody building confidence actually in themselves as well to be able to answer that question. But just know audiences are looking at those things. It comes back to your consistency. So practice this. Start thinking about, or even take your hand and one hand on the table and one hand that's free to convey a message as you're speaking, as you're practicing your delivery. Start to think about this. If you're up on stage or you're in a room, put one hand on your leg and the other hand up above the table. This will help you to make sure that you're not overly emphasizing with body movements as you're delivering a point. I hope that's helpful. All right, another question. Let me do a quick time check here. We're still good. All right. Isn't there a fine line between confident and cocky? How do I manage the line? There is definitely a line between those two. And I will tell you, one of the first things that I evaluate in just the first few seconds of somebody coming out onto a stage to do a speaking engagement is, do I view this person as confident or are they coming across as cocky? There is indeed a very fine line there. Cocky is typically happening when somebody does not have the ability to read the room or the audience. They're talking more about the I and the me versus the you and what's important to you. So you want to be cautious with this. Avoid, or I should say it this way, put yourself in the shoes of the audience as soon as possible, even if you can do this before the speaking engagement. I personally, I always have a thing where I want to get to a speaking engagement early. If it involves travel, it's the night before. If it's in a hotel where they have a conference hall, I will get myself into that conference hall the night before. There's nobody in there. There may be a few people setting up. I walk through the audience area looking up at the stage. I want to see what they are going to see. I want to make sure I put myself in the audience's shoes. It not only brings me comfort to know where I'm going the next morning, but it also allows me to see the perception or the angle at which people are going to view me. That allows me to keep more of this confidence feel that I know the space and I know where the audience is going to be viewing me from, rather than the perception that I may come across as cocky because I'm not comfortable. Cockiness, make no mistake, cockiness is typically coming across in people who are uncomfortable with themselves. So put yourself in the shoes of the audience, and that will help you not come across as cocky, but more so confident. All right, another question. I think we have one more moment here for the final question. I have trouble with pauses as they seem to create an uncomfortable situations. Any input on this? Yeah, I would tell you get comfortable with uncomfortable situations. Go into this knowing that you're going to pause to deliberately create what you view as an uncomfortable situation. The only person who feels uncomfortable with a pause is you. The others are waiting for you to continue. Your audience is waiting for you. They are thinking about what you just said, as I mentioned a moment ago, and they're now getting prepared for what's coming next. So when you use the word uncomfortable, know that only you are uncomfortable, unless it's an extremely long pause, of course. But a pause that's a few seconds, remember, it's only you that's feeling uncomfortable in that. Start to get more comfortable with that. Know that you're going to put yourself in a scenario to practice being uncomfortable. That is the progression of most positions. When you get a new position or a new responsibility, you should feel a little uncomfortable in that. It's not that you're uncomfortable necessarily, it's that you're learning the ropes at that time. Practice is what makes this perfect. All right. I appreciate everybody joining today. I hope you pulled out from this what I'd like to what I was hoping to get across and to share with you. And I hope it makes you a better speaker. Go out there, present, establish your authority, shape the perception, and most importantly, build the trust. Thank you very much. Have a great day.